Hello, friends. This is Mack Payne, owner, operator, and founder, better known as the FOO of the Vietnam Veteran News Podcast. In this video, I come to you with big news. I have just published another podcast episode over at the Vietnam Veteran News Podcast. I highly recommend you go over and listen to that podcast because it's got some very, very good stuff in it about what it was like to serve in Vietnam in the U.S. Army. Something very interesting happened the other day. I just happened to be on YouTube and discovered something called Stuff of Life, War and Life Project. The title of it was Patrols, Payroll, Cobra Pilot, 2 Tours in Vietnam. I said, hey, that sounds familiar. I started listening to it and the voice sounded familiar. I said, that voice sounds very familiar. I think it's me speaking. Apparently, 2 years ago, I was on an interview with this project and talked about my times in Vietnam, both tours, first and second tour. And it was on YouTube, had thousands of views. Said, wow, that's pretty good. I listened to the whole thing, and even though it was me talking, I was very impressed with it. I talked about my experiences in both tours. The first tour with the 4th Infantry Division and my second tour with the 101st Airborne Division. The first tour was very interesting. It was totally different from my second tour when I was flying, and all I did was fly around and shoot rockets and do things to bad people. My first tour was more like a National Geographic's magazine article. I did some unusual things there. I was assigned to the 4th S&T Battalion, 4th Infantry Division. It was not my first choice, but in the Army, when they assign you to a job and a location, you go there and you do your best. So that's what I was trying to do. Strange thing happened when I arrived there. Whenever an officer is assigned to a unit, they always go in and meet the battalion commander. I went in to meet the battalion commander, and lo and behold, turned out to be a person who didn't care much for me. We had had dealings when he was in the personnel office in the Pentagon. And because of those dealings, he didn't like me. He was on a mission to get me out of the Army because he thought I was that bad. But actually, he was the one that was bad, which you'll find out if you ever read my book, Vietnam Veteran Memoirs. Anyway, in this interview, I talked about my experiences there. And due to the fact I was not one of the battalion commander's pet boys, I would always be sent out on the least desirable missions, one of which were recon missions. We had to run out of the base camp at Camp Anari for the 4th Division because all the combat units were out somewhere doing combat. So they decided to send out recon patrols out of the base camp just to keep an eye on things. Now get this. Here we were. I was a quartermaster officer at the time in a quartermaster unit. And we would go out on these 4-day, 10-mile hikes into the woods. The people on the patrols would be somebody who, say, was a forklift operator or a clerk in a warehouse, people like that, or a petroleum supply specialist. And they would select 10 or 12 people to go out on these patrols. Now, whenever they would go to a section or a unit or somewhere and say, I need 2 people from your unit to go out on a 4-day recon patrol with Lieutenant Payne. Now, who do you think they sent out there with me? Do you think they sent their best men? Nope. They sent the people they wanted to get rid of. So here I would go out on a 4-day, 10-mile march with 10 or 12 basically losers, people that nobody wanted back in the base camp. So I talk about these experiences we had out on these patrols. It was pretty interesting. Had a few run-ins with some snakes and other things. And on occasion, we would actually run into some bad people out there. But thank the good Lord above, I survived all those. And then I described my experiences in the 1968 Tet Offensive. We've all heard of that. I was right in the middle of it. but I chose not to participate in it because I had a very important mission I had to carry out. And that was the pay officer. We had people spread out all over the place, and it was my job to go and pay them wherever they were. And I took that job seriously. And even though there were battles going on all around me, I concentrated on paying the troops. Sort of interesting. Sometimes we'd have to duck gunfire as I paid our people, but they got paid because that was my mission. Those are some of the things that I talk about in this episode, and I'd highly recommend you listen to it because I think you'll find it as interesting as I did when I heard it again. Wish I could remember when I did the interview, but it was a good one. So do yourself a favor. Go down below this 1965 vintage Philco TV set down here and click on the link that'll take you straight to the podcast and that episode where you can listen to me talking about my experiences in the 4th Infantry Division. It was a real hoot. Also, you'll notice when you go down and click on that link, right above the one for the podcast, you'll find the one that says, "Buy me a coffee." And yes, you're right. That is a bald-faced request for financial support for this podcast. I have been doing this podcast for 12 years, put out 3,200 plus episodes, and I've paid almost all the expenses. If you like what you hear on my podcast, maybe you'll consider donating a few dollars. One cup of coffee is only $5. And you don't have to limit yourself to one cup. You can get 2, 10, whatever. It's okay with me. But the main thing is this. Listen to episode 3211. It gives you the real story of the Vietnam War from the viewpoint of someone who was there right in the middle of it. I even explain why the VC and NVA soldiers were such tough opponents, which they were. After you listen to that episode, you'll know the whole story of why they were like that. Again, do yourself a favor and listen to it. With that, this is Mack Payne closing out this video where I'm introducing to you the latest podcast episode on my podcast, episode number 3211. Please go listen to it. I know you'll be glad you did. So thank you for listening to this video, and we'll talk soon.